Order, order. The committee is now in session. This session this morning is looking at the experience of starting up, spinning out and scaling up science and technology companies in the UK, and the work of research and technology organisations in commercialising research and innovation. In our first panel this morning, we are joined by Byron Dixon, who is the CEO of Microfresh, and Mr. Dixon is joining us virtually this morning, so welcome to you, Mr. Dixon. And by Julian Hanak, who is the CEO of Purespring Therapeutics. Good morning, Mr. Hanak. So if I could start just by asking both of you, from your own experience, what is your assessment of the opportunities available for a science and technology company in the UK, and are there improvements that could be made? Maybe, Mr. Hanak, we'll start with you.
Well, there's huge opportunities. I mean, the quality of innovation and science in the UK has always been strong and continues to be so. And I think there are a number of routes to forming companies, spinning out that technology and generating value. And they're very diverse. But in answer to your question, yes, I think significant improvements should and need to be made.
Thank you. Any examples of these?
Of the improvements that are needed. I think access to early phase funding is important. Access to second phase funding. So I think before the technology has reached, in my case, it's in clinical trials, it's pharmaceutical development, gene therapy. So before we have clinical data from patients, when it's very easy to get venture capital money because you've got a product which can be measured and probability of success and risk being assessed. But the gap between seed funding and that proof of concept data is a desert for funding, and it's challenging.
Thank you for that. Mr. Dixon, could you tell us a little bit about your experiences and any improvements that you feel could be made?
Sure, yeah. As Julian said, I think there's lots of opportunities out there. There's lots of initiatives as well, which are really helpful. We've used Innovate UK in the past to develop various products, and it's been really successful for us through grant funding. So I think there's lots of opportunities. The universities are very, very helpful and very, very skillful. And we've got some of the best scientists in the world in our universities. I can vouch for that living in Leicester. Improvements, I think one of the major improvements that need to be looked at is how do people access this? And when I say how do people access this, I mean most entrepreneur type businesses like mine are generally a person that's had a product or a service and sold it. So we don't know how to access these high-level funding opportunities, these high-level support opportunities, and these people that can take us to the next level. It's really quite tricky to find. And I found Innovate UK almost by accident by doing a program at at Aston University. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known about it.
Did you feel, as a startup, did you feel confident enough to go for it without knowing where everything was and where all the support was available?
The short answer to that is no. It's easy to say 10 years on how I felt, but the short answer is at the time, most small businesses, and when I say small, I'm talking about less than £250,000, which is a lot of the business in the UK. It's very, very daunting, and you just look around and it actually looks like it's not for you unless you're a business employing 50 or more people.
Thank you for that. I'm going to turn to my colleagues now, starting with Dr. James Davis about the scaling up aspects.
Right. Yes, so Mr. Hanak, we've referred already to startups, but in terms of scaling up science and technology companies in this country, what are the opportunities, and again, what are the hurdles?
So I can talk from our experiences at Purespring. So Purespring was spun out of Bristol University from the group of Professor Moin Salim. So again, high quality science to look at treatment of renal diseases, kidney disease, using gene therapy. And we were very fortunate in that Syncona Partners, a UK-based venture capital arm, was able to put seed funding behind the company, significant funding, so that we could get to the stage where we could get operational and start developing programs and demonstrating in the laboratory the efficacy of these products. The scale-up part comes now. So in our Series B funding, which we're closing at the moment, that has been largely by venture capital, but this time most of the venture capital interest comes from groups outside the UK. And what would be nice would be if there was more initiatives, more bridging to get to this Series B when you get your clinical proof of concept, and then it's very easy to demonstrate value, reduce risk, and show what the opportunity really is for your technology and your company.
Understood. Mr. Dixon, do you have any comments to add on that topic, on expansion?
Yeah, I mean, similar to echoing what Julian said, but also I was on the select committee not that long ago where we talked about scale-ups, and at the time the UK was the third in the world for startups, but 13th for scale-ups. Scaling up is very, very hard. We're ready to scale. We use Innovate money to develop a product to stop mold growing on walls. And when it came to scaling, interacting with VCs it can be quite daunting, and there's nobody to hold your hand. What we've seen, which is a bit of a bone of contention, is, again, echoing what Julian said, is overseas attitude to investment is far more conducive than in the UK.
Right, okay, very interesting. And speaking of overseas, international expansion of such businesses, what comments would you have on that in terms of the support available in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, we are a truly global business. We've got 13 offices in 9 countries, and I've just got back from the Caribbean, where we're looking to expand into the Caribbean, Central and South America. The support from the DBT has been very, very good, actually. And I think the service that they offer is fantastic. I'm a big advocate of the DBT, Department of Business and Trade, sorry. And the support that they give you is superb. I think the only, if I had to say room for improvement for the DBT, is not enough people know about it. So I do a lot of advocacy work as an export champion, but I'm amazed at how many other businesses, 5 million and below, or even 10 million and below, do not know the DBT and do not know also that they deliver the quality of service free at the point of delivery.
Okay, so potential to be exploited there then. And Mr. Hanak, is that your understanding too in terms of companies wishing to expand internationally?
So the typical route for a biotech company to expand internationally is to do an IPO, and the vast majority of those public placements occur on the Nasdaq in the US because of the valuations and the liquidity of the stock once you've done the IPO. One of the companies I worked for in the past, we did float on AIM, the alternative investments market here in the UK, but it suffers from lower valuations and lower share turnover, so it's challenging. And so anything that can be done to improve that basis here in the UK to make it to get higher valuations and higher activity through UK stock exchanges would be a huge benefit for companies looking to scale. Because once you've IPO'd in the US on Nasdaq, the focus and the value of the company tends to shift to the US, and that's been my experience.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask just a follow-up on that? We've heard before that sometimes when that scale-up funding comes, or if companies apply for that scale-up funding, there are a lot of strings attached to that make it very difficult to accept that scale-up funding. So, for example, around profits and around IP, have either of you experienced that? And I say that because the similar situation doesn't appear to be the case in the US. Yeah,
so, our scale-up funding has come almost exclusively from venture capital. We've applied for grants from UKTI and Innovate UK quite successfully, and there's few strings attached to that other than if you put a consortium together of other partners, you share value, share emerging intellectual property. So we haven't experienced strings attached to funding because most of
that was venture capital funding.
Most of our funding is venture capital, and that's the vast majority of the funding that comes into my industry for scale up because of the quantities needed to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon, any comments on that?
Yeah, well, we don't have any funding at the minute. We're all privately owned by myself, actually. But what we've seen in the UK is the attitude to funding is almost like a Dragon's Den scenario, where this poor little entrepreneur, that how have you managed to get this far without this multimillionaire's money that they don't know what to do with? Whereas in the US, the attitude is very different. It's almost like they really appreciate the fact that you've taken something from 0 to 65%, and they're quite happy to give you what you need to take it to 90 with a much higher valuation. And that's something that I think needs to be addressed. It's just the way of the world. And now that, we have, the world is a much smaller place, the competition doesn't just come from up the road, it comes from overseas.
Thank you, and thanks, James. Tracy Crouch.
Can I
Sorry.
just say, there is one other initiative that we find incredibly helpful, and that's the R&D tax credits. Especially now that for a small to medium enterprise, the return on that is more significant than if you were a large organisation, and there are no strings attached to that. So that's enormously helpful in supporting fundamental research in companies like Purespring Therapeutics.
Thank you. Tracy Crouch.
Mr. Hanak, if I can start with you, could you just talk to me about workforce, about talent? How can the attraction and retention of talent in the UK be supported?
So the vast majority of our employees are UK-based, well, exclusively UK-based at the moment, but we have imported talent from the United States and from Scandinavia, and gone through the process to become a sponsor in order to do that. So not all the talent that we need is available in the UK, but most of it is. Retention has been very good recently in the UK, while the company continues to grow and offer opportunities for career development for staff. So I think we're very lucky in our industry to have the cell and gene therapy Catapult, which was formed more than 10 years ago now. And the number of people that have been through that organisation, been trained, become useful at all levels of management and as lab scientists as well. And we have a number of employees, like most UK gene therapy companies do, that have either come from the cell and gene therapy Catapult or we are currently working with them.
So, that imported talent, is that in a particular kind of skill set?
Yeah, it is, because gene therapy is a pioneering area of science. A lot of traditional talent coming out of universities is more traditional molecular biology, biochemistry. A number of universities specialise in, like University College London, have gene therapy modules and courses and master's courses as well. And cell and gene therapy in universities like Leicester, for example, Loughborough is very strong. The talent's there, but they get their experience by doing their first industrial placement in places like the cell and gene therapy Catapult, or in our laboratories as junior scientists as they grow through. So the
doing more to try and encourage students to be taking these gene therapy, these specialist courses.
Yeah, I think some of these masters courses or modular courses are extremely valuable and turn graduates with highly transferable skills who could work, they've got biological sciences education, and they could do a number of different jobs, but the ones interested in gene editing, gene therapy, these advanced therapies, they need a bit more, and these additional courses and funding for those additional courses would help the talent pool in the UK.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've just taken on a microbiological graduate, and we generally don't have a problem with attracting talent. I say that not in an arrogant way, but we are a bit of a unique type business. I think one of the challenges are everybody knows that there's practically full employment at the minute, so retention for us is good, but it does mean we have to pay higher wages, and we have to offer more benefits, which is, again, not a problem. It just sometimes can make us a little bit uncompetitive when we compare with our overseas competitors.
Do you both offer higher level apprenticeships?
Yes, we do.
You do, Mr. Dixon? Not yet?
Not currently, no. We do placements for students, 2 months placements in the summer to try and help share experience and get people interested in the community. And I'm also involved with ESAC UK, the European Society for Animal Cell Technology UK, which focuses on developing young science in industries like mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, just to say, sorry, not high-level apprenticeships. We do gap year students.
Okay, thank you.
With De Montfort University and the University of Leicester. And again, it's generally very good quality. The only shame is that they have to go back after the gap year.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Don Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hanak, I'm just curious, if you had to do a 30-second pitch, what would it be?
For UK talent or UK value generation in businesses.
And for what you're doing, because what you're doing in regards to gene therapy is actually could be the future of treatment.
So Purespring Therapeutics is a company that wants to transform the lives of people suffering from kidney disease. That's 1 in 8 of us worldwide. 840 million people worldwide have kidney disease. And because of research done in the UK at Bristol University and now through Purespring's early work, we've been able to demonstrate that we can modify cells in the kidney to maintain kidney function and kidney health for much longer and transform the lives of these patients. That's never been done before, and at the moment Purespring's the only company that can do it. And this is a real opportunity for Purespring and for UK research coming into commercialisation in the UK. And because of that, we've been very successful in attracting venture capital money and to be able to take our programs into patients, which we hope to do in the next year or two.
Thank you. And so what are the challenges? You've spoken about some of it before. What are the challenges in securing private and public funding, and who gives you the most money?
Our founding venture capital company, Syncona, are the majority shareholder of the company. But now we're diversifying that base with European and we hope US investors too, with a view to making the company ready for either a public offering on a stock exchange, or often these companies get acquired when there's sufficient value, either because the value becomes so high that we get made an offer we can't refuse, or because you need that capital to scale to bring these programs into the market, which is something that small companies don't have the resources to do.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon, I was fascinated about in your industry. You've developed something to combat mould in buildings. And I'm just wondering, when you go for funding, do you go to specific industries like building industries, or do you go to health industries, or do you just go anywhere where you think they might offer funding? And what are the challenges around that?
Anywhere. The challenge is our product is not just for buildings, it's for clothing and bedding. So it means you wash less. That's what it does. The microfresh name means you wash less. So we have a real generic spread. It can go into anything in the world. So we don't look for specific industries for funding. We look for generic funders, and generally people that find it exciting. And that's what we've seen in the US is people say, I want to be part of this story. I don't want to be the person at a dinner party, in a few years' time that says I could have been part of that when this name is everywhere on lift buttons and trains.
Why do you think people in the UK and the funders in the UK are not excited?
They are. They're just... it's just a very different conversation. It's more about, I'm going to say this, it's more about them than about us. That's what it feels like. Whereas in the US, it's more about them saying, you've got a great business, you've bootstrapped this business yourself. We want to be part of that journey. Whereas in the UK, it's more of a Dragon's Den style of conversation. I'm a multimillionaire. You've managed to get this far. You're a little bit lucky. If I give you a few pounds, you give me a big chunk of your business.
Yeah. And my last
a
question.
Lot less attractive.
Yeah. My last question. I'm fascinated with the mould aspect in buildings because, as you know, we have a huge issue with mould and the knock-on effects. And we've taken evidence here when we talked about fungi and the development of lungs. What's your 30-second pitch
There's two 20-second pitches. I'm going to take a little bit more. So microfresh in anything, in clothing and footwear, means you wash less. So we were sustainability before it was the thing. We want to be the Gore-Tex of freshness. And home fresh is where we've taken that with Innovate funding and developed that for construction. So in any walls, mold can't grow that have been home freshed.
Wow.
It's a preventative treatment.
Wow, that's phenomenal. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Graham Stringer.
What benefits have your businesses had from working with research organisations?
Oh, enormous benefits, because all of the original ideas, the original intellectual property and patents filed come from academia. And a lot of that academic research is funded by both grant funding through the grant councils, but also from charities. Kidney Research UK, for example, and the Nephrotic Trust UK have put money into the labs that had the idea, which Syncona invested in to make Purespring.
Byron?
Yeah, well, my mum was a single parent with 5 kids, and I could do chemistry, and I made a product, and I thought I was really smart until I started to meet academics. Fantastic support from especially universities, second to none. Aston University, prominent microbiologists, the best in their field, helped us take us to a new level. De Montfort University in Leicester, the Centre of Excellence for Textiles in the world, they helped us to develop washing products that you can infuse in the washing process. So we now we don't have any laboratories anymore. We outsource all of it to universities because they are excellent.
How do you outsource it to universities?
We've just done research projects together, and again, some of them with Innovate funding. So just to give you a couple of everyday examples, we knew our product worked on leather. That was what it was meant for footwear, to stop shoes going mouldy. To develop it for construction, we just went straight to Aston and worked with building people there, engineers there, microbiologists, and we did a joint project, but again, as I say, with Innovate funding. And at the end of 18 months of trials, we had a product to put onto walls to stop mould growing.
The reason I'm interested, I was in Oxford University last Thursday talking to an undergraduate who was doing biology and medical sciences, and he was telling me that he loved his course because they had NMR machines that were a small box, whereas when I went to university they were room-sized NMR machines. But those resources are locked up in universities, which would be very useful to many businesses. Do you find that you can use the kit that universities have?
To myself.
Yes.
Yeah. The universities, I think, again, it's one of those, like the DBT, it's one of those, the best kept secrets, that we have some fantastic universities. We go to Aston, use their kit. We go to Leicester, even Side Business School in Oxford as well, because I did a business growth program there. So they give us access. And again, it's working in collaboration that you can use access to their equipment. And of course, you pay for it, but they are on the doorstep. And so we don't need to have extensive laboratories anymore. We just work straight with universities.
Your experience, Julian?
Yes, very much so. Without some of the resources at the universities that we collaborate with, some of the work we do wouldn't be possible. The specialist equipment, testing new machinery. I think one of the struggles universities have is that they can't just give us this equipment at cost. It is already assigned to the functions that the university is performing, and so they have to charge overheads, and that overhead can be uncompetitive compared to us putting the research work out directly to a contract research organisation. And so any funding that can help universities collaborate with companies to help carry that cost burden would be enormously appreciated.
You're not interested in doing this on marginal costs, because certainly for undergraduate equipment, and I guess quite a lot of postgraduate equipment, a lot of it will be standing idle in the vacation. So it's not just spreading the sort of capital cost as it is, there must be a marginal benefit or a benefit to them if they just use marginal costs.
Yeah, I mean, but typically we're after the latest and the best equipment, and that tends to be heavily utilised. And there is an overhead. I mean, there's the facilities, there's the insurance, there's everything that covers that. So we fully understand that there's an additional cost. Help with that cost would make this equipment more affordable, more accessible.
If you mentioned intellectual property and the work that goes on in universities, if we'd been having this conversation 15, 20 years ago, I suspect many witnesses would have said, well, there's a real problem because the culture in universities is to get research out there, because if you're the first person to discover the structure of DNA or anything, you want that paper there before your competitors. Whereas in the commercial world, you want to hog that and develop it and make money out of it. Has that problem gone now? Has it been resolved, or is it still a problem?
I think it's largely been resolved, but not without some contention. So what a company will do with an invention that they're collaborating and commercialising together with universities, insist on intellectual property being filed in the form of a patent. And the UK Patent Office is very efficient. That does embargo the discovery and the invention for approximately a year, can be a little bit longer, while you add data to that invention to make it secure, and then file a full filing, a PCT filing. And that is a frustrating time to a leading academic whose research status is based on publications, his grant of funding ability is based on publication, and the researchers in his team need to develop their careers with publication. But a delay isn't an embargo, it's just a delay.
Thanks. In your experience, Byron?
I think it depends on the university. So we've seen with some universities, they're very commercially minded. Others not so, but the landscape is definitely changing. The ones that we generally deal with are more commercially minded now, and sometimes they're even happy to go with co-branding because we are a brand that's seen around the world and around the country. There's some of them are quite happy with co-branding, so we've seen a lot of flexibility. That's what I'd say. Whereas 10, 20 years ago, it would have just been no, we're the university and we own the IP.
And my last question to both of you. I mean, you're presenting a case that the relationship between research institutions, particularly universities, is good with businesses. How could the government help to improve that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a number of initiatives, and Innovate UK are a great example of that, where funding given to collaborative programs where to help ideas from universities become commercialized, but have those led by industry so that the product does make it to commercialization. It's not just adding more intellectual property that eventually expires because there's no way of exploiting it. That's great. There was a recent competition that we applied for. We were unsuccessful, not because our application wasn't good, but just because so many people applied. So making more money available to those kind of academia industry collaborations to get inventions into commercialization would be enormously welcome.
Thank you. Byron?
I think similar to Julian, again, working with universities so they have a real commercial arm and a real commercial edge to what their research is all about. And we've gone to some universities with research, with projects, and the costs have just been prohibitive because, of course, in business, we have to have a return on investment. And sometimes that return on investment time can be quite short because we have to generate cash. So I think some work to do with commercializing those divisions or those departments of universities to work with business, I think the government could help with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I'm going to come to Tracy, then Stephen.
A follow-up question from Dawn Butler's questioning about funding earlier, and I do appreciate that I'm asking this to two chaps, but one of the challenges that women face is that less than 2% of women secure venture capital funding. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts or comments on that. Byron, I see you nodding, so I don't know if you want to come first.
I mean, we're a black-owned business, and we always say we're a great business that's owned by a black guy, not the other way around. But the funding for black-owned business, the numbers are horrendous. I think it's something like 0.4%. And when it comes to black women, it's something like 0.01. Why that is, I don't know. I generally don't see funders that look like me. And again, at the risk of being boring, when I go to the US, I do see funders that look like me. So I think that's probably got a lot to do with it. I've not seen many women funders either. So again, maybe that's a parallel argument.
No, you're good.
So the first Syncona company that I worked for, the CEO was Madeline Lee, who was then with LifeArc, I think retired now. But and so in biotech, I think it's much more diverse. Our CSO, Alice Brown, is a main proponent of our technology and instrumental in us helping us get funding. And a lot of the venture capital people that we speak to, the partners and the people that would join our board if we're successful with their investment are female. So it is changing, but a lot more needs to be done.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. And Stephen Metcalf.
Thank you very much. Both your organisations, your companies now have reached a stage where they're in growth and are engaging with funders and universities. But it wasn't always like that. At some point, back in the past, there was a light bulb moment when someone came up with an idea and thought, this could make an interesting product or service. And just to put everything you've just said over the last half an hour into context, I wonder if you could both sort of briefly describe how it went from the idea to something you could then take to someone to show them and ask them for support or funding, what the reception was. If you like, a sort of a brief history of the company in the context of your experiences of how you found someone to ask the right questions to. Because I think, Byron, you mentioned that you didn't know about Innovate UK. You stumbled across it at some point, and now you're engaged with them, and it's fine. That door is open, and it may not always work, but at least you know where the door is. I'm interested in how we get that information out and what practical experiences you've had so that we can hear how we might put a view on improving those. Where shall I start? Shall I start with you, Julian, and then I'll give the final word to Byron?
Sure.
I think for Purespring it was slightly different because Syncona, the associates that work at Syncona, one of their roles is to attend conferences, to build networks with academics worldwide, actually, but a lot in the UK as well, and to keep their eye on inventions and possible business opportunities. And at the same time, the professor at Bristol University, Moin Salim, had demonstrated that he could deliver genes to this crucial cell in the kidney. And I think, so in a way, it was a combination of a talent scout from Syncona meeting somebody with a great idea, wondering what to do next, that started the conversations with that eventually formed Purespring.
And Syncona had all that experience of knowing which doors to knock on, etc.
Yeah, they had formed a number of gene therapy companies before, and they had the funding to do so.
Okay, great, thank you. Byron.
Yeah, well, I mean, to cut this short, I stumbled into the leather industry. I made a product as a chemist to stop shoes and leather going mouldy. And then we found out it stopped shoes smelling. So Next launched a range in 2011 with microfresh technology. Then in 2014, I did a program, the Goldman Sachs Business Growth Program at Aston University. And it's there that I stumbled across Innovate UK. When you're running a business, the last thing you think about is doing a course. But I thought I'll try it and invest in my time. And that's where I met Innovate UK. So that was the light bulb moment where when I did the Goldman's program, I actually realized, talking to other CEOs, that I potentially had a worldwide global business. So that was the light bulb moment. And now, of course, we've got the Help to Grow program. We are one of the feature businesses, which again is like a version of the Goldman's program. So I'm hoping that more people stumble
So was your first product the leather product? And I mean, what were you working for someone else at that point, or were you working on your kitchen table?
Yes, actually, yeah.
Right, you've invented this product that you think is going to stop leather going mouldy. What did you do with it next? Who did you tell? How did you set a website and start marketing it, or?
Absolutely, yeah. And lots of no's, lots of who are you, who are you, and then eventually. Again, stumbling across the University of Leicester, they said it should stop bacteria, which means shoes won't smell. So we got Next to launch a range in 2011 of non-smelling kids' shoes, and it's grown ever since. And as I say, the other pivotal moment was doing the program at Aston, where I met with people that said, actually, you have got a really cool, clever business that could really go places. Because up until that point, I was really playing with it.
Right, and had another job doing something else, or?
No, that was my only thing. So I was actually...
So I read your website, and what happened in 2006? Was it 2000? Well,
that was when I made the product, because I had a company selling leather products like lacquers and polishes, and I thought this will be just another product in that range. And now it's taken over everything. We've got rid of all the other leather products. It's just Microfresh and Home.
And you've also helped your local football team?
I have, which I still play for, and their socks don't smell.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen.
The other half very happy.
I'm not sure whether Stephen is trying to get tips from you or advice, but Mr. Dixon, there's been a suggestion from one of the committee members that you try out your technology on the walls in Westminster. But
I need this too, by the way.
Can I thank both members of our first panel, Mr. Hanak and Mr. Dixon, for the evidence you've given this morning. And at this point, we'll ask our second panel to join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. And you.
Because my son is currently studying at Fraunhofer, UK. Stephen, do you have a...
Well, I suppose I'm the vice chair of the all-party group on photonics, which the Fraunhofer is particularly interested in. So I don't know if that needs declaring or not.
And I am the chair, so yeah. Okay, thank you. And if I could introduce then our second panel. So firstly, we have Simon Andrews, who is the Executive Director of Fraunhofer UK. We have Dr. David Wilkes, who is the Director of the Innovation Ecosystem at Innovate UK. And we have Rosa Wilkinson, who is the Director of Policy at the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. So welcome to all of you. And if I could start with Ms. Wilkinson. So welcome, and can you give us, to start with, a flavour of how what support a Catapult can provide to a science or technology company?
I think our support is incredibly extensive. We are the people who will help a company move a concept, an idea, through to its market-ready commercial status. We give companies access to the kit and the expertise that they may need. Crucially, we also give them the answer to the Ghostbusters question, who are you going to call for that additional support that they might need. Connect them with some of the other support organisations like the Department for International Trade, or indeed the financial services and venture communities. We hold their hands. We're a rather nurturing set of organisations, I think, the Catapults, as they go through what can be a difficult and challenging journey on the road to commercialisation. Do you have a
kind of set programme for doing that? If I were a new start-up company that had come to you for support, would you have... Here's the steps you have to take, here's the people you have to speak to, here's the courses you need to undertake?
It's going to look very different for every single company, inevitably. But of course, where it begins is with a conversation. Certainly, we will want to understand what is the concept, that a company is trying to move through that commercialization journey? Or what is the problem that they are trying to solve? And then drawing on our own expertise, or alternatively connecting them with some of the universities or research base that may well have answers to those problems, we help them to develop solutions.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to my colleagues now, starting with Graham Stringer.
If I can ask Simon, what role does the Fraunhofer have in supporting startups and spin-outs? If you can tell us the obvious.
Sure. Our core business is providing scientific expertise and scientific excellence and applying it usefully. So we would do that with a startup or a spin-out in the same way that we would with a multinational. We have to charge a fair market rate and not displace existing economic activity. So we do it by doing R&D. Now, it could be that with a larger company, that's £1 million project, they're funding directly. It could be with a smaller company, that's £5,000 of look-see work to see if the mirror blows up in this laser. So there can be an element of hand-holding and support for the younger companies, but our core business is actually doing R&D projects. I think where we would add value is by working through supply chains and helping some of the smaller, younger companies get into projects with the larger companies. There was some good PR recently, some cold atom traps, the cutting edge of quantum tech on aeroplanes with BAE Systems and Kinetic. There were two very young Scottish startup companies involved in that project as well, who perhaps wouldn't have had that access just on their own. So forming collaborations, I think, is a very valuable part, as well as providing the doctoral training for key employees for high-tech industries.
We heard from Byron Dixon in the last session that he didn't know about all these resources that there were. There's difficulty from that side. Do you do anything to go out and find the Byron Dixons of this world?
Yes and no. We will broadly market our services the way any company would do. Given that our model is very much about deep technical expertise, we go to photonics events and quantum events, and sometimes there you will find people from a wide variety of sectors looking for sensing and imaging solutions, and they can meet them that way. We would also go to trade shows and events that were market specific, whether that's renewable energy or pharmaceuticals, to say, is there technologies we have with photonics that can be applied there? But we don't go knocking on the doors of all the universities to speak to the latest spin-out or that sort of thing. I think Dave's organisation, Innovate UK, has Business Connect, which is very active in that sort of area.
You mentioned putting small and large, research facilities and businesses together. Some years ago, this committee or its predecessor committee did an investigation into the Valley of Death and why so many businesses fail after initially promising starts. One of the excellent pieces of evidence we heard from Cambridge in that study was the best researchers in the country, in many cases the best researchers in the world, just finding their way into businesses that were having problems in that area. They learned about business from doing it, and the businesses learned about cutting-edge research. Is there anything you can do to facilitate that? That's always struck me as the best possible way, rather than institutional ways of encouraging growth. I mean, what's your experience? How do you do that?
There are great examples and terrible examples of business and industry working directly together because of those sorts of cultural mismatch of expectations, mismatch of timescales, mismatch of priorities. That does happen. I think previous guests gave great examples of how it can work well. I think we need to share best practice. And I think that the RTO community broadly is partly an answer to that question. Ourselves, we're very much in partnership with the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, but we are one step away from them. We're working with industrial contracts, with deadlines, deliverables, specifications, in a much more hard-nosed way than the average academic in the average university is accustomed to working, exploring things and writing papers. So There's a time and a place for a middle ground of an RTO to do that TRL 3 to 7, if we speak that language, of taking something that's possible through to a field validation of a prototype, which then gives more confidence to the company, more confidence to the investors, and helps build up the supply chain of all the components to make it more market ready and not just a theoretical bench proof of concept.
Could I just jump in on that point? The question of how we make sure that those brilliant researchers are based inside some of the companies that are developing great ideas is something that we struggled with. And actually what we did was develop a programme which I think has now grown significantly across the Catapult, which we call Researchers in Residence, where actually some of those leading researchers are placed inside the company to give the company direct access to that know-how, that knowledge, that expertise.
And it works the other way. They learn commercial practices. Sorry.
And they absolutely get to understand what are the problems that the business is next looking to solve. We've got to think of this as a two-way street.
Mr. Wilkes, Dr. Wilkes, have you anything to...
Yes, absolutely. And Rosa's right. It's that the two-way interaction is critical. So academic researchers understand what business needs and opportunities, as well as businesses understanding what the cutting-edge opportunities are. We've already heard this morning a few good examples of collaborative research and development programs that obviously Innovate UK runs. About a quarter of Innovate UK's funding goes to academics, but only when they're in those collaborative projects with businesses. Another thing we do is knowledge transfer partnerships. And Simon talked about the difficulty in businesses and academics understanding each other. What we do with knowledge transfer partnerships is a three-way thing. So you have the academics, the cutting-edge research, you have the businesses with a clear business need, and then we fund an associate who's a recent graduate who goes into that business and provides that conduit from, and the translation, if you like. And in 80% of the cases, the business takes that person into the business because they provide that new skills and capability.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Just for the benefit of those watching, Mr Andrews, you referred to TRL's technology readiness level, is that correct? Thank you. And can I also just ask a supplementary, you said you worked with large companies and smaller companies, and we're particularly interested in how spin-outs are able to develop. What would be the proportions of the companies that Fraunhofer works with in terms of your SMEs versus big business?
I would say we're broad-minded and go across the spectrum, and that's a very, very deliberate thing to do. It can be as much effort to secure one large contract as it is a small contract, and so we over across maybe 200, 250 odd companies we've worked with, I would describe 90% as SMEs and perhaps 20% as definitely maybe micro companies. That's typical of the demographic of photonics companies in the UK, and it's fairly typical of the demographic of companies generally in the UK.
Thank you. Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you very much. As you may have heard from the previous session, because I think you were all here, I'm very keen to hear practical examples of the challenges that individual businesses, scientists face. And so if you are thinking in practical terms about bridging that gap between research or an idea and then bringing that to industry, in each of your experiences, can you give me any sort of, what are the main practical obstacles that people have brought to you that they're looking for some assistance with to bridge that gap? And perhaps we'll go along, starting with you, Simon, if I may.
So as an RTO, I think Byron gave some great examples. I mean, he's got rid of his labs altogether. I think the value we bring is being an external applied R&D resource that they can turn on and off. We've seen multinationals disinvest from corporate labs. So if you see a young startup or spin-out who will probably have the absolute core deep technology of their product, but the periphery around it isn't necessarily there. So we're primarily about expertise, and that can be in signal processing and image processing and electronic design and mechanical design, and helping create a system if they had a nub of an idea. Perhaps they already have a laser source, but we then turn it into a hole detection system. So it's horses for courses as to what they need. So if they want us to do TRL3, we'll do it. If they want us to do a field trial, we'll do it because we're there to help. So it varies a lot.
Okay, so if you've met them at one of these photonics showcases you're attending, they're coming to you and saying, the obstacle for me expanding is that I've got part of an idea, I don't know what to do with it. Can you help me find someone to expand that idea? That's the role you would see yourself fulfilling. That would be the obstacle they would be facing at that point they'd bring to you.
So most of the value I think we would add would be in maturing the technology and developing it and de-risking it and taking it out of the lab, helping them with packaging, but also proving with applications. Okay. So we're very, very broadly connected. It's difficult to find the right people sometimes, so we don't just stick with our laser community. We work with biologists and chemists and so on, have great contacts there, as well as further up the value chain. And it should also reflect that introducing an SME to a multinational is a good thing, but also the multinationals need to know where all the future technology is coming from. So that works both ways as well.
Okay, thank you. Rosa, so I'm interested in the obstacles that people are facing to bridge that gap and how.
And we deal with probably 5,500 businesses every year. And if I think across what it is that they most struggle with, first and foremost, it's the expertise point that Simon was just making, so I won't repeat that. Second of all, an awful lot of the kit that they will require to test out their idea costs quite a lot of money. And that's before you know whether something is actually going to work and be able to work at a cost that will prove viable for the company in the longer term. So we give them access to the kit and the caboodle that they need, as well as the know-how that they need. I think that there's a third practical problem, and that's about knowing what the hell's out there, knowing where they can find support, knowing how to connect with a VC community. That's not a given for many small and growing companies. In a past life, I was managing director of what was then the Small Business Service. And actually, that sort of higher level financial literacy is a real challenge for businesses. So having some sort of intermediary that will help them to articulate and connect with an investor community is a really important thing when you're looking to develop and to grow. The fourth thing, I'm not entirely sure this class is as practical, but it's a very real problem, is confidence. And actually, you are taking a gamble as an entrepreneur that something is really going to deliver for your business. You need to feel that you are in the best hands to help you guarantee that and to de-risk it. That's very much what we do within the Catapults. We take away some of the risk so that they can be confident in moving forward and begin to make investments of time and money themselves.
Fantastic, thank you. And finally, David.
Yes, there's two things I would point to. The first thing is market opportunity. We see so many examples of great research looking for an opportunity, that technology push concept. We run a program called iCure, which is Innovation Commercialisation of University Research, which is focused on helping the researchers understand market opportunities. We pay their salary for 6 months to go out and actually speak to customers, and in nearly all cases, the thing that they thought their research was going to do doesn't work, but they find 3 or 4 other opportunities. So I think that business market pull opportunity is critical. And the other thing we talked a lot about already this morning is access to finance and helping researchers to understand where they can go to. But again, this is another two-way street. We do a lot of work with the investor community. You need to de-risk it from both sides. The confidence, they need to have the confidence to take the personal risk. Byron talked about his own personal risk here, but you need to help the investors understand the opportunity. And if this business is being supported by a Catapult, it already reduces the risk for their investment.
Got it. Thank you very much. That is very helpful. And just a brief follow-up with you, David, if I may, which is about the role that Innovate UK play in assisting specifically universities to commercialise their ideas. Can you just expand on what you do to help them, or do they need your help?
Yes. So Innovate UK is part of UK Research and Innovation, so that's a much broader ecosystem. Research councils obviously fund this world-leading research. Research England and counterparts in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland support the capabilities of universities, so technology transfer offices and the like. And then with Innovate UK supporting organisations like Catapult, but the grant funding that can take those great ideas. But it's not enough to sit there waiting for them. We need to be right in with the universities to understand what the opportunities are. The programme I talked about, iCure, is all about, and knowledge transfer partnerships, getting into the universities at the earliest stage so we can see what those opportunities are, and then making sure that there is a clear market opportunity, because otherwise you spin out a business and it will fail very quickly, and that's obviously something that none of us want. So
do you, in that example, sort of, you're in the university, you're looking at what's going on, say to them, them, whatever they, them are. So that could be a really good commercial idea. Have you thought of doing this, and this with Ed? Because I have, I as Innovate UK have seen this work elsewhere. You could do something with this. It's not just waiting for them to say, we think this could be commercialised. You insert yourself into that process.
Yes, Simon talked about part of Innovate UK's system is an organisation, Business Connect, so 250 innovation experts who, I mean, they, apart from anything else, they run 400 events. We've got 400,000 innovators, in their network. They're always looking for those next opportunities. Sometimes putting industry together with academia, sometimes putting academic colleagues in collaboration with other academics to take the idea forward. And are there areas where that could be improved, that process, or do you think it's working well? I think it's working well. We talked earlier about the fact that people stumble across Innovate UK, and that is something we're very aware of, doing much more to make sure that the opportunities are visible. We've just launched something called an Innovation Hub, which I'd recommend you all go and look at if you want to understand the different opportunities that are available across the system.
Okay. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Tracy Crouch.
Quite often at the committee hear about some of the challenges of trying to spread the expertise around the country. So I just wondered, how do RTOs contribute to spreading the opportunity more equally across the UK as part of the Levelling Up agenda? Dr. Wilkes, should I come to you first?
Yes, so the wonderful thing about the Innovate UK Catapult network, the 9 organisations are spread across 50 centres of excellence in literally every corner of the UK. The map is very, very dispersed and crowded. And a lot of the catapults work very closely with... We should acknowledge that the catapults are where they are because they're in clusters of excellence in the UK, either industrial excellence and or building on research excellence. So they're there for a reason. They can build on that local ecosystem, but we have very strong evidence of strong local spin-overs.
Can we see that map? I think it would be really useful.
Yes, of course. It is on the Catapult Network website, and you can see every one of those centres of excellence, yes.
Dave has just nicked some of my lines. I mean, frankly, the high-value manufacturing catapult is the biggest of all of the catapults. I think we're in 23, 24 sites around the UK. Frankly, we get everywhere. We get into every region, every devolved administration area. And the impact that we have is often connected to those local plans to improve the local economy. Some of you will have picked up my Yorkshire accent. I'm a Doncaster lass, and just down the road, a little way away from me, sits a site called Orgreave. Some of you will remember that from the industrial strife that was experienced there back in the day. You go to Orgreave today, it's a site where actually there's incredible high-value inward investment. Many thousands of jobs have been created, often paying above the national average in terms of wages. That's all filtering out into the local community. Why? Because companies have clustered around our Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre and our Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. We're offering something that has exerted a real magnetic force on investment, and that is really driving improvements in local economies. That's what we do.
You're clearly very passionate about that, and I think the committee...
It's ace.
Are there any cold spots that you would still sort of kind of, like to target?
I think that there is a real challenge for us, coming back to the points that have been made earlier, in making sure that wherever you are, you can find your way to our support. You know, it's certainly the case that if there is not a local centre, it may be that Catapult services are not talked about as much. That's something that we're trying to address by connecting with the people who are already there. And I think that that's a good way forwards. One of the things that I would be a little bit concerned about is if we end up creating lots of new centres covering similar things and therefore diluting the value of the expenditure that is made. I think that there is a balance to be made there. Let's make sure we get the internal wiring right.
Thank you. Mr. Andrews, if you anything to add?
I think I agree with all of that, but it's still there's a time and a place for local delivery, depending on if the organisation has the scale and can get out there. That is terrific, but the United Kingdom's a very small group of islands, and there are places for national centres of excellence as well. There's something of a photonics and quantum cluster where we are. Partly that's why we are there, but partly that's growing because we are there, so that these things can be incredibly effective economic drivers. I would also reflect, we're discussing the role of RTOs in commercialisation, and across the UK the diversity of the organisations is absolutely enormous. There are some that are expertise based, some that have huge infrastructure and capital equipment that young companies couldn't afford. But in terms of the signposting and where it is and things like that, we have got examples like we have national labs, we have PSREs, public sector research establishments, places like the Met Office, the National Nuclear Lab, National Physical Lab, FERA, just outside York, Scottish Whisky Research Institute, it does what it says in the tin, but ones that specialise in seeds and ones that specialise in automotive. Some write market reports, some do a lot of convening, some do a huge amount of training like TWI, the Welding Institute. So we have, I think we have a difficulty that there are some wonderful, I should say I'm a director of AIR2, the Association of RTOs in the UK. We have an incredible range of assets that some people may not have heard of because there is no one coherent system. The establishment of Catapult did a great job of ensuring they all had the same name. That was very, very wise in terms of the branding and the communication, but there are so many others out there as well that can all really help.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Thank you. Dr. Wilkes, the government has provided funding to Catapult since 2011, and in 2023 they agreed to allocate 1.6 billion core funding to Catapults over the next 5 years. Is that enough, and what impact will it have?
Well, is it enough? It is a huge investment. Let's not, it is a massive public investment, real confidence in the Catapults as an organisation. We could obviously do more. We have a system in place where the Catapults are driving real impact. Rosa said that we need to be careful that we aren't diluting the amount. So coming into the next government and the next spending review, I think we'd be very, very keen to discuss opportunities to increase the network. The Catapults work best in a system. It's in a balanced system. So the collaborative R&D funding from Innovate UK is a key part of how the Catapults work with industry and with academia. So without that, if you try to expand the organisation hugely, it needs to grow with that balance. Now, of course, you make comparisons with organisations like Fraunhofer in Germany, which are billions of pounds a year and over multiple decades, and we've got some work to do to catch up. But at the moment, I was incredibly impressed by the government's commitment to and confidence in the Catapults coming into this most recent spending review.
Ms. Wilkinson.
Now, how should I answer that question? Is it enough? Of course, we could always spend more. But actually, one of the things we take very seriously is our duty to the taxpayer. We've got to deliver a return for UK PLC. And I think that that's incredibly important. One of the things that I see as I look around the world at the moment is that there are many other nations which are upping their investment in this space. And what they are doing that for is to capture some of the value that is emerging from research right around the globe. We've seen it in the Inflation Reduction Act, we've seen it in the EU Green Deal in Singapore and elsewhere. Now, that's a real issue for us because there is a danger that if some of these key research projects and commercialisation programmes go to other countries, then ultimately that is where the value will settle. And that matters for us in the long term. So what we need is certainty of funding. It would be good to have that in the longer term. You know, a 5-year cycle is great because it's better than some other bits of government, but it's not giving us the certainty that we may need for commercialisation programmes which may take decades. You know, if I think of some of the work that's going on within our nuclear industries, for example, long-term commercialisation endeavours, ditto in the healthcare and pharmacological areas. That's what we need.
Can I just raise, you asked specifically about the impact, and going into obviously the negotiations with Treasury about that 1.6 billion, they rightly held us to account for what's happened for the investment you've had over the last 10 years and how is it going to deliver impact over the next 5 years. The very detailed, robust academic evidence shows that businesses, SMEs that have worked with the Catapult grow 50% faster than businesses that haven't worked with the Catapult. And when you add that up over the 25,000 SMEs that Catapults will work with over the next 5 years, that delivers a five times return on investment.
And Ms Wilkinson, you've spoken very enthusiastically about UK manufacturing, and that enthusiasm is infectious. But I wondered, with your extensive expertise in this area, do you think the government's doing enough to support UK manufacturing? Especially considering that when you look at the figures, we're lagging behind other industrial nations in terms of our capacity here in the UK, despite having some of the most brilliant innovators and entrepreneurs. What more should the government be doing to support manufacturing?
I have been extremely pleased in recent years to see manufacturing moving up the league table of big policy issues. Thank God, because actually we need a robust, thriving manufacturing community if we are to be a resilient nation, not just in terms of our economy, but in terms of 101 other things as well. I'm pleased that manufacturing is now talked about. The M word can be used without embarrassment. I want it to be used more. I would like to see government really developing its industrial policy, dare I say industrial strategy, so that businesses within that community can say, you know, the UK is the place really to do business. I want to come here, I want to grow my business here. I think there's further to go.
And Mr Andrews, with regards to the thirds funding model, what sector is it most difficult to attract funding from?
I struggle to think of one. I think so do you mean of the three sectors, of the three sources of income? So the thirds model is, I think, a reference to a headline that's often quoted in terms of the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft model as operated in Germany, where 1/3 of they receive core funding of approximately 1/3 of their total annual expenditure from a mixture of 90% federal and 10% regional government. That's assured. Speaking of long term, I have to echo the points about long term. In Germany, they think long term's 15 years. Pact for Innovation lasts 15 years. That gives confidence not just to the employees and the startup companies, but the investors and the foreign investors that Germany's committed to innovation. That helps drive foreign investment and build trust. The other 2/3, so there's the government one. There is then direct contracts, which is mostly industrial, and then there is what they call collaborative. In Germany, some of that would look like Research Council to me. Some a little bit like Innovate UK. So on that, the industrial one's definitely the hardest of those three sources of income, and it certainly is for us running Fraunhofer for the benefit of the UK from Glasgow. Asking a company to put its hand in its pocket and pay cash like Byron does, that's tough. If there are other mechanisms of support, they will welcome them. But I would have to echo the points about the quantum of funding and add in the balance of funding. Aside from the Catapult funding that's controlled by Innovate, Innovate UK's budget is way behind where it should be. There are huge numbers of collaborative R&D competitions that are hugely oversubscribed with really high quality proposals from very ambitious companies trying to grow, trying to scale, hoping to get that sort of mechanism to show the investor it works, and it works in this market, and it works in this application. We're hugely underfunding that, and the UK spends very approximately 80% on R and 20% on D. South Korea is the other way around. So if we're jealous of the way that other countries do these things, I'm not suggesting we would in any way reduce spending on R, and even Blue Sky is incredibly important for the long term. I don't think we should reduce funding for universities, but if we're seeking to place more bets and have more R&D and more innovation in the UK, it has to be in the D side. There's a paper produced a few years ago by Air2 talking about development, design, de-risk and deployment. There's all sorts of things in there that are very expensive, very difficult for little companies to do on their own, and that's where I think we can have greatest impact for the UK.
Thank you. Could I just come in on the back of that? Because that distinction between the R and the D in terms of funding volumes is an important one. But here's the thing. If once an announcement has been made that public funding is going to go in a particular direction, it can have an incredible impact in terms of bringing in additional private sector funding. But there's an if, and that's about pace of delivery. I do think at times we have seen some significant announcements which have then taken an awfully long time to come to fruition, by which time their magnetic effect in terms of tempting in the private sector investment may have dissipated.
Thank you.
The other thing is that we must remember, obviously, there are big constraints on the public purse, but in any case, we're looking for at least double the amount of private sector investment alongside the public sector investment. So we've got that's the really big prize here. Of course, I'd support Simon's case that Innovate UK could spend more money very usefully, but we've really got to crack the private sector investment.
Thank you, Rebecca. Ms Wilkinson, can I come back to something you said? You talked about the industrial strategy. Do you feel the government produces multiple strategies in science and technology areas. Do you think there's a disconnect between the strategies and delivery plans?
I think that there can be. It is interesting that we have a number of sector-facing teams across government. They sit in different government departments, and we have a science and technology framework, of course, that sits within DCIT, the department that you watch over. I think since we saw the machinery of government changes that brought out the creation of DCIT and DBT and DESNES, it's taken a little while for some of the connections to be reformed. I think that there is often a challenge of making sure that the policies join up with each other in a more holistic, more systemic way, because that's what businesses need.
Thank you. I'm going to come finally to my colleague, Chris Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. Ms Wilkinson, I'll say as a Lancaster, you just uttered a phrase I'd never hear from a Yorkshirewoman, which is we could always spend more money. There you go. When we're talking about spending more money, and I think Dr Wilkes actually made a point here, the real prize is to try and get that sort of 2-to-1 ratio of private to public funding. How successful has the high-value manufacturing Catapult been in achieving that?
I think we've been very successful. I don't remember the exact figures, but I think for every pound of public funding, we deliver about £4.50. It's around 4.5 times. So I think that that's pretty darn good.
I think it's excellent. So what's the secret?
I think what's the secret is about connecting great ideas with the talents to deliver on them. And that's precisely what we do. We're very much the champions, if you like, of facilitating the commercialisation of good ideas or brilliant research.
And how would you say that UK science and tech companies compare to their international comparators? We've heard about Germany. I mean, I grew up in Germany. I mean, it's something that's already very much baked into the culture of development. I mean, we are playing catch up in a sense, but how successful are UK startups and spin-offs in terms of attracting that extra financial investment from the private sector relative to their international comparators?
I think that they struggle, to be honest. I think that there is something around the level of financial literacy, which I mentioned earlier. There is also something about the visibility of the financial communities around the UK. I mean, if you're in the Golden Triangle between Oxford, Cambridge and London, you may well be able to find your way to an investor fairly easily. If you're outside of that, it remains a bit of a challenge. Very often companies will look to traditional sources of debt finance in the first instance, but they won't be as confident or necessarily know anybody who has been through the process of getting VC investment, equity investment. You know, we've got to grow their understanding of how finance works as much as we've got to grow their ability to manage innovation projects.
Do you think that's something that needs to be developed in the existing Catapult model, something that needs to be almost sort of...
It's certainly something that we within the high value manufacturing Catapult have been looking at very closely, and in fact we have grown our own capability to engage with the investor community, and I think that that's important. But I think that there is a role for lots of different organisations to play. It may be that some of the banks can take more of a role in this. It may be that in some of the communication that is done either by national level governments or indeed regional governments, they can do more to make visible venture communities.
It's like sort of a suite of catapults doing different sort of bits of the...
Altogether.
Sorry, Dr. Wilkes.
Yeah, I was just going to add, so we just talked about this third model, which is very direct evidence of industry investing in catapults, so that's excellent and easy to track. What we're seeing more and more, getting very strong evidence that investors coming into those businesses once they've worked with a catapult, that's an order of magnitude greater than the direct investment. So something like £3 billion of follow-on investment into catapult supported businesses, and that's a lot of that is about the risk, the risk and confidence. If a business has worked with a catapult or is continuing to work with a catapult, they have confidence.
Is that where that sort of 50% extra growth comes from that you're talking about? Which I think you said that companies have been through the catapult had 50% faster growth.
That is, one of the ways that is by building the confidence for their investment.
Yeah, it's sort of a happy sort of symptom of it.
Exactly, yes.
And you can see I'm dying to come in on the back of that. You know, one of the brilliant things that the catapults offer, and not just mine, is that if you're an investor, you can pour money into a company to buy the kit that it might need to develop brilliant idea X. Or, and that might cost you, 10 million because it's expensive kit. Or you can pour in 2 million, which will deliver on their operating costs. So it's the CapEx, OpEx issue. And actually what we allow is more of the money to be transferred onto the OpEx side because we're giving them access to the kit that they need to test out brilliant ideas until they are absolutely sure that the concept works and they can take it to market. And that means for the investor that they have the potential to invest in more companies, maybe a little bit less in each of them, but the money goes further as a result and increased possibilities of return for them.
So is this what Mr. Andrews was talking about in terms of actually sort of smoothing that balance between the R and the D portions? Getting, maybe sort of being a bit smarter with the R part, sort of putting it in more pots so that there's, Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you to all three of our witnesses in this panel. It's been a really interesting session, and that concludes today's session. Order.
The proceeding has ended.